Brass trains, I tell you. Amazing to look at, but man are they finicky. And I mean finicky. Brass. 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 This train is a basket case, but today I'm gonna see if I can fix it and get it back on the rails. Hey guys, Sid from Sid's Trains here, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a great day. Today we're going to be taking a look at a model I picked up recently. This engine right next to me is a third rail Baltimore and Ohio 210-2 Big 6 steam locomotive. And if you couldn't tell from the intro of this video, it's a brass model. So what do I mean by brass model? Brass models are kind of what they say. They are models that are built out of brass or constructed out of brass. Most Lionel and MTH steam locomotives and some diesels are constructed out of die-cast metal, usually some kind of zinc alloy, which means that they're a cast metal. They're in a cast and it's all kind of one piece. There are some separate details and things like that, usually made out of brass or possibly some kind of cast metal, but they aren't any kind of stamped metal. However, brass models like this B&O engine here are usually a mix of stamped brass and cast brass, and so they're very much detail oriented. They're trying to be very specific to a prototype, and Third Rail and Weaver and Right of Way Industries and various other companies in 3-rail and 2-rail O-scale have made brass models, and they're very pretty. They're very pretty because they're very accurate to the real prototype, and they usually get all the details right, and the paint jobs are usually really good on them. Lionel and MTH also have amazing paint jobs, but brass just kind of has this different kind of elegance or kind of look to it. But there's also some kind of quirks and kind of finicky aspects to brass models. Unlike die-cast models, brass models are kind of not as rigid. The frames can flex sometimes. They're also made of several different pieces instead of one big piece of metal that's cast. They also have solid boiler tubes. What I mean by that is die-cast models usually have the underside of the boiler cut out so electronics can go up inside. But brass models usually have minimal cutouts and everything is inserted from the front or the back of the model to get electronics, motors, and things like that out. Obviously, the frame can still drop out from underneath, but it's very streamlined in the aspect of what's inside the engine. Everything is inside this tube, and there's not really any good access to it. So it makes it hard for people like me who want to work on these models to get to the electronics or the motors or anything like that on the inside of the model. Not only that, they also have some kind of odd construction sometimes. Usually the front end of standard boiler style steam engines that aren't streamlined have these boiler fronts that are friction fit into the front, and so they can be removed and they usually fall out in some kind of shipping, and the same thing happens at the back of some of the tenders. And at the beginning of the video you got to see that. The boiler front had popped out of the front of this engine, and it still is sitting here right now. And the back of the tender had popped off as well. And that's fine, I can always fix that. But it's kind of finicky construction. They could have put a screw from underneath to hold it in, and the same thing on the back end as well. They could have just put a screw with a little L bracket to hold it on. But instead, these companies decided, let's do a friction fit. It must have just been the kind of standard at the time when these models were made. And Third Rail still does that to this day. But it's just definitely finicky, and so when you hear someone talk about brass, they're like, oh, it's a brass model. Well, that's usually what they're talking about. They're talking about the fact that they're kind of finicky models, and it usually applies to all aspects: cosmetics, mechanics, and electronics. And so in today's video, we're going to take a look at what's going on with this Big 6 and see what I can do to improve the looks of it some, improve the mechanics and improve the electronics some. But I kind of want to keep it in its stock form, so we're going to see if I can restore this back to its original form so that I can have an amazing running model of the Baltimore and Ohio's Big Six. And so here we are at the front of the engine, and as you can see, this boiler front's just been sitting here. This has been sitting like this since I first got the engine the other day in the mail, so all you really have to do is you see it's got a little bit of a lip on this piece of metal, and so you just take this and you kind of find that spot where it's straight up and down, and right about there it looks good. And so I'll just push it back in, and there we go. Look at that. There we go. Now we got a good looking front end to this B&O Big Six. And so now that that's done, the engine's looking pretty good, but at the back I believe we have similar issues. Yeah, this piece needs to be inserted properly, and it's kind of weird. It's got these tabs, and so it's really hard to get it back in there. I'll just kind of slip it on for now, but I'll have to use both my hands in a second here. Yes, you see it just kind of goes back on. And I'll permanently put it back on, or rather put it in all the way. Right now it's still sticking out a little, but it's kind of hard to get that back in there. But on top, we also have issues with some of the cosmetics. This hatch is missing. It's in a little baggie inside the box. I believe the hinges are just a little messed up, so I'll have to take a look at that and see if I can get that put back on. But see, just a little work and you already have it. But see, it's just finicky stuff. Like, the stuff just falls off, and so it's weird because I'm used to, or most people are used to, die-cast models, but this, of course, is brass, so you have to do some different stuff than what you would normally do with a die-cast model. So now that we got the boiler front back on and the back of the tender kind of sealed up a little, we can do some initial testing. And so let's turn on track power and see what this engine will do. That's a good sign, just it kind of sits there. This engine has TMCC and what they call EOB, that's Engineer on Board. That's an old style of Train America Studios command control with a cruise control system. I'm suspecting that this engine has some electronics inside that aren't really hooked up properly, because there's some interesting things going on while it's just sitting here. It's kind of off of camera, but in the back, the tender has some marker lights, and those are not lighting up. There's probably some plugs undone in the tender, and it is a good sign that it's sitting here. I do hear a bit of a humming from the tender, so that's good. So let's just see if I can guess which engine number it is. I'm just gonna guess it's engine 1. So let's see. Haha! Look at that. That probably tells me this engine has probably not been run very much, which is a good sign. But let's see if I can address it at all. I believe I hear the smoke unit just kicked on. Let's let it sit here for a second and see, but I'll blow the whistle. That sounds pretty good, very standard TMCC. Let's listen to some of the other sounds. That's awesome. You see the smoke is kicked on, and we got all the other sounds, but let's see if this engine will move at all. Whoa! Whoa there! That's crazy. I think I know exactly what's going on right now, but let me try and get this engine back into camera before it shoots off anymore. Whoa there. Whoa there. That's going really fast. So, what you see happening there is the engine is getting no communication from the sensor on the motor. Let me turn these sounds off so you can hear me better. What's going on here, and I turn the smoke off as well. What's going on here is there is a sensor inside the engine, and it is not sensing the motor spinning. So there's definitely either a sensor bad or some connections that are not hooked up properly in the tender, which is causing this engine to shoot off. But that is good to see that the engine is not binding up or anything like that. All the running gear looks very clean to me, and the pickup rollers don't show very much sign of wear. So I think what has happened here is somebody has dismantled the tender before, and possibly the engine, and has caused the electronics to not be hooked up properly. And so let's take this engine off the layout and take it out to the workbench and open up the tender and see if we can find anything interesting going on in there. I think we're going to find some connections undone, and I think it's going to be really simple to get this engine back up and running. And then all we'll have to do is do some basic cosmetic work, and we'll have an awesome Baltimore and Ohio engine here. So we're out here at the workbench, and I got the Big Six sitting here. Pardon any of the other projects in the background, but we're going to be taking a look at the engine here, and it's kind of cool. I'm getting a closer look at some of the details on this engine. It's a really nice model. I think the engine is actually going to not need too much work, so I'm going to save that for later. I'm just going to set it over here. But right here we have the tender, and so earlier I had taken the tender and I had just set this piece back here, but I'm going to decide now to take this off because inside of here are all the electronics. So we'll just set this off to the side here, but these all should slide out, but I have to get to the plate that holds them in. So we're just going to set the tender on the side here, or actually I'm going to put it on upside down, and I see some screws down here that hold this kind of little frame on here. So we're just going to very carefully remove some of the screws down here. It's like I said before, this is a brass model, so it's very detail oriented. So there's lots of handrails and things that I could mess up if I'm not careful. So I'm just making sure to hold the tender carefully and make sure I don't cause any major issues. But let me get these off, and then we can get a better look at what's going on in here. And there we go. I got the tender frame off of here, and I can tell there's a switch that's supposed to be in here that isn't. So I did see a switch in the little baggie, which I'll have to go grab here in a few minutes. But it's nice to get the tender frame off, and now we can see some of this little plate in here. Inside of here, you can it's probably a little hard to see, but you can see the speaker in there, and there's this plate, the electrocoupler. So I think these screws here should allow me to remove this plate. To allow me to then get this whole assembly out of here. But let me see how this works. I think this one screw takes some of this off, and here we go. Here's all the old EOB electronics. It's actually not too bad in here. It's got some tape on all this stuff. Someone has definitely been in here. I see a lot of unplugged connections. There's all kinds of wires on the inside of here that don't look like they're installed properly. So let's see what I can do and see if I can get some of these wires undone. This is a bit of a rat's nest, honestly, but not the worst thing I've seen. There we go. There's some stuff that's definitely not routed properly, and there we go. There's part of a switch. That's supposed to be a switch, but it's just the back plate to the switch. Yeah, somebody has definitely kind of butchered all of this, and it's time for me to put this back together properly. That all of this is explaining a lot. There's just wires that are undone. Yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on with all this. Yeah, someone has definitely been inside of here. I can see someone was attempting to try and do some stuff, but they just didn't want to continue with it, and so I guess they put it back together. We got twist ties, kind of a weird way to put stuff. I feel like it would be better to use a zip tie or something because it's a little more sturdy. I'm just gonna pull all this electrical tape off. I know why it's here, but it's just not. I don't think it's really necessary. Once the board is in there, there's going to be no issues with stuff touching. There's a wire in here too. What does this go to? There's a wire stuck in this tape. I'll have to figure out what that goes to. But set this to the side, and we got various wires going around to things. I think this is for the volume. Yeah, it looks like it goes to the volume pot. Yes, and yeah, this isn't bad. This is very standard EOB. This setup isn't something that's like brand new or kind of out of the ordinary. I'm taking this is the Rail Sounds card. I'm taking this off to get some better access to some connections here, and trying to get it so I can just take this whole set of electronics off, so I can then examine all of this better, so I can get a good understanding for like what's going on here. What do I need to fix and figure that out. It obviously works to an extent because the engine moves, so that there's definitely some connection that is hooked up for the motor, but there's definitely some stuff that isn't. I might also have to do a modification on the board here to make it function a little better, but let me tidy up some of this and get back to you and so I can show you what it should be like and talk about what I've done. I know it might be a little bit hard to see right now, but I have everything laid out, and here's the little baggie. I figured out what the switch in this bag goes to. It goes to the cruise on-off switch. There's these two wires here, and they've just been cut from the switch, so those just need to be reattached. I'm also noticing there's this black wire, and I believe it goes over here to this three-prong plug. It's just been cut as well. The coupler just needs some connections resoldered and put a little bit of insulation around things to make sure nothing shorts out. Everything is just like someone took this apart, didn't know what they were doing, and put it back together. That's really what I think happens here. And so I think once I get everything back together, this thing should run properly. I'm going to get the tender kind of reassembled properly. And then I will take the shell off the engine so I can just have the bare frame so that I can then test the engine and see if the sensor's working and everything like that. But this is definitely looking good, and this might just end up being a very simple reassemble it and it works fine. So it might not need any boards or anything like that, and if that's the case, that's amazing. So I have everything back together now. I had to redo some of the wiring. I redid the coupler here. I've redone the one switch that was missing. I've made sure all the connections were together. There were some connections over here that weren't together. Tons of things were just unplugged, so someone just took this apart. Whoever owned this before me or someone before them had taken things apart and definitely made it so it wouldn't work properly. And so hopefully now that I put this back together, the marker lights will work, the backup light can connect here and work, and hopefully the cruise control will work. I'm going to take the shell off the engine here in a few minutes, but let me put this back together and we'll see if we can get the marker lights and stuff to turn on, and hopefully we can get this engine to run smoothly. And I'm really excited to see this engine run because it's such a beautiful model. Okay, I've got the engine back together, and it still needs to have the end cone put on, but I've yet to test it. I haven't even opened up the engine, so I want to see if it even works now. It was a bit of a trick getting this tender back together because you have to slide everything in from the end. There's several screws, there's a switch to put on the bottom, so it was a bit of an ordeal, but everything is back together, and so let's turn this on and see if any issues come about, or maybe all I had to do was put this thing back together and maybe it'll work now. So let me apply some power. That's a good sign. And if you can maybe see just over here, it's hard, but there are marker lights over here, and so that works now. Let's fire up the engine. That's a good sign. Let's see if the coupler works now. Oh yeah, the coupler's working now. And let's just give it a little throttle. Oh my god. Look at that. It's working. Let's put it in reverse. It's interesting. It's speeding up a little, so I think I need to do some more testing on it, but this is really cool that it's working. We're definitely getting somewhere, but just look at that. It's definitely speeding up for some reason, so I definitely need to take a look at that, but we're definitely getting somewhere. Let me take a look at some of the EOB settings and see if I can get it to maybe function a little better, but this is so cool. Look at this. That's awesome. Let me look through my booklet some and see if we can get this thing running really well. Okay, so everything's in pieces now because it was having issues. The engine runs fine. The sounds work, the lights work and everything. But you would increase the throttle to one speed step, and then it would just constantly want to speed up. And so I was like, this has to be some kind of board issue. And I have plenty of boards to swap in and out. And I figured out that it was this radio board right here. This is the Lionel radio receiver board for TMCC control. And this one, for some reason, no matter how I would set it and whatnot, it would not take a reset. And it just wants to constantly increase the speed to maximum speed, basically. And so, yeah, it's weird. And so everything's disconnected right now. It's just connected enough where I can run the engine. And so I'll just lift up the motor here a little. And as you can see, it will just cruise perfectly at one speed step, and I can increase the speed. And EOB has this kind of momentum where it likes to slowly speed up. But there you go. And look at that. And now I can slow it back down and bring it to a stop. That's amazing. So now that I've figured out that it was just this board, I think this is why someone had taken this apart. Someone had taken this whole train apart just to get to this board, and they didn't figure out that this was the issue. And so they just cut wires and then put it back together and was like, I'm done with it. And so I guess their loss is my gain, and now I have this amazing engine that I can now put back together. I'm going to do some basic maintenance, clean the gearbox, and oil some things up, but everything's working amazing. The EOB tack sensor, the tack tape are in amazing shape. I don't think this engine was run much, probably because this bad radio board. And so let me once again put this all back together, and then I can figure out some of the EOB settings, and then we can run this thing around the layout. But yeah, this thing is definitely interesting. I gotta say, putting this thing back together is definitely a bit of a nightmare. So many wires, so many things, gotta make sure you don't want to break. But yeah, let me get this back together, and then we can go see what it looks like on the layout and run it around. Real quickly, before I reassemble the engine, I just wanted to note that I did fix some of the cosmetic issues. This handrail was bent, so I bent it back. This hatch before was missing, so I reattached that. I just had to bend the hinges a little to reattach that. Here on the back is the cap. I've put it on fully. It's on properly. You might be able to see some dust and stuff on this tender. I'm going to give it a good cleaning. I'll use some touch-up paint on these little chips down here. Overall, this engine was treated pretty well. I must say it has very minimal wear on the underside, so I'm very happy with how this turned out. Very finicky to work on for sure. Shoving all the wires through and getting the tether out. Very, very finicky, but this is a beautiful tender, and I'm now going to reassemble the engine, make sure everything is in good working order, program it all up, and then we'll take it out to the lab. So as you can see, this is an amazing model. I've been able to restore it back to its original form. Obviously, someone was trying to repair it. That radio board was bad, and I believe they opened it up because it was having that issue where it was speeding up without the commands actually being sent. But I guess they didn't find the issue with the radio board, and instead they decided to just unplug things and cut wires and then just put it back together because they couldn't fix it. But it was a very simple fix, and now I have this beautiful brass model, and it's no longer finicky to work on because, well, it's fixed now. So I can now enjoy this amazing, beautiful brass model of the Baltimore and Ohio's Big Six for years to come now. It's a very amazing model. Maybe at some point in the future I can upgrade it to more modern electronics, make it even better than it is now. But for now, it's a fixed model, it's amazing, and I'm really happy to own it and have it now in my collection. I hope you all have enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments below what you think. Did you like seeing me restore this engine? Was there anything I did that you wanted to learn more about? Or do you have any questions? I'd love to hear your thoughts and maybe answer any questions you may still have after seeing me work on this model. But as always, make sure to subscribe, click that bell for notifications, and smash that like button. I'm Sid, and I'll see you next time, guys.